1. I'm 21 years old and moved to Maine from the Keys when I was 5 years old, and have lived in the same old farmhouse since. I believe it is haunted, but also that I could just be insane. Am I insane? It was a big jump, to say the least. Not only were we 30 minutes from the ocean, which was much different from living on the shore, but the house was extremely old, too. Maine is a very cute state. Anyone who has seen it knows that it has a very quaint, peaceful awe to it. Much of its land, including its buildings, are old and or historic. Life tends to feel very slow and calm here. But residents of Maine know its nature to be somewhat different sometimes. Maine, as well as all of New England for that matter, has a very strange feeling to it. Because it looks inviting. It almost feels scarier because it does not visually pose any immediate threat. I remember arriving to the house for the very first time. It was beautiful on the outside, tucked into large bushy trees and pine with a river behind it. The property was huge, filled with rolling hills and trails that followed through tall pine. It was summer when we moved, and I remember believing this place was magical and that it might have fairies. Mom and I walked around exploring the property, while Dad started taking things inside. I noticed how bright the world was. We could hear only the sounds of nature and the dimming voices of my dad and his buddies who came to help with the move. Early July, swarming with heat and the vibrant scent of orange daylilies. We took the path out back, following the tree line to our left field of overgrown grasses, large bushes of flowers, and lupine, shaded by a towering canopy of pine, birch, and maple. The field was vast and empty for all but one crabapple tree. I wanted to go to it, but my mother warned me of ticks, and that we should wait till the fields are mowed. The river was beautiful, and wrapped around 3/4 of the property's line. The woods were dense with clear trails, surrounded by pine, birch, maple, honeysuckle, goldenrod, Queen Anne's lace twisting ferns, and other wildflowers. My mother noticed a less visible trail that went across a small runoff from the river. We jumped over and climbed up a steep hill to see beyond it a waterfall and a very old stone foundation. I asked what it was, and she told me it must be a mill. At the time I did not know what a mill was. She explained about our house and that this was somewhat common for Maine. We trekked down to it, and it was beautiful. We discovered many things buried in the water and surrounding woods. Pottery shards, bottles, and 2 coins. We later brought them to our town's historical society, and they told us that the original property was built in 1779 with the mill. The original property, other than the barn, that still stands, was lost in a fire, and the family moved. In 1891, a new house was built connecting to the barn, which is the home we live in now. It was a really cool discovery, and is what got me into studying history, which is now my major in college. Then we went inside. It felt nowhere near as magical as outside. The windows were very tall with old warped glass. The hardwood floors creaked, and something about it felt off. I cannot explain it with words. It is almost like it's breathing. My sister and I ignored it and explored the house, calling dibs on bedrooms. However, its old design had a particular quirk to it that I liked. The mudroom was also a sunroom, though very narrow and small, filled with windows and glass so old it is warped. The crown molding has flowers in it, and the windows are tall so the home soaks up sunlight. Upstairs, the wallpaper in the hallway was a patterned watercolor of rolling fields, farms, and deer. It looked just like outside, only the colors were far more dull and earth-toned, with a background of brown. Other than that, the house had been painted all white by the previous owner. Even so, I liked it. It somehow made it look sunnier and spacious. The white against the old hardwood floors cooled it down and made it feel homey. But it still felt odd, almost like it was not truly our family's, similar to the feeling of walking into a business 30 minutes before close. Because of its age, it needed renovations. My father is a carpenter, and paid 2 of his buddies to help move and renovations. While they renovated, my family all stayed in one room while his buddies slept on an air mattress downstairs. That night, I had sleep paralysis. For context, I never had troubles sleeping before, and had never had sleep paralysis. That night was my very first experience with it. I dreamt that there were spiders crawling over me, and that I could not move. There was also a hand inside my mattress, reaching up and trying to pull me in. I woke up in terror. My parents wrote it off as stress caused by the move. I had sleep paralysis and nightmares regularly in my bedroom, not the room we all stayed in after the move. So much so that I started sleeping with my little sis. I remember the first night I went to sleep in her room. I had woken up from a nightmare and had to get water downstairs. The stairwell on the second floor has no windows, only 6 doors, 4 which lead to bedrooms, 1 storage closet, and the small attic door. When I left my room, I remember fiercely looking away from the darkest corner on the stairwell, which led to my mom's office. When I reached the stairs, I looked across to the dark corner and saw a glowing orb. It was white with blue glowing spots. I was not afraid of it. More so, I was curious. I walked closer and eventually came to my senses and went back into my bedroom. I was frequent to nightmares, and as I got older, I just wrote it off as sleepwalking. I have never seen anything like that in this house ever again. I was also about 6 and very imaginative. I had an imaginary friend, though I never actually saw her. I only pictured her in my head. As I spent more time in the house, my sister and I noticed strange things about it. Here is a list of things that still go on to this day, and singular strange events. If you listen closely, it sometimes sounds like someone is walking up and down the stairs at night. Up 2 steps, down 3, up 4, down 2. The doors are all original, so it's easy to hear when someone is actually on the stairs. This noise is far more subtle. When you get to the bottom of the stairs, it always feels as if someone is peering at you through the dark living room to the left. I sometimes close this door before night, because it seriously weirds me out. Speaking of that room, we have always had dogs, and it's honestly not a frequented room. It's the second living room, and has no TV. 2 windows, a fireplace, couches, a table, and some bookshelves. Though it looks comfortable, it does not feel it, and I suppose that might partly be why it's less frequented than the main living room. We have always had dogs, and they have all taken a liking to the same spot in the room. It makes me less afraid, but it's still strange to me. Back to this room. I did sleep in there once. I was very sick with strep throat during a storm and was reading all day on the couch. It was a nice way to escape my bedroom, without having to listen to the TV in the other room. At night, my father gave me NyQuil. I was too exhausted to move and fell asleep in there. I had a nightmare and sleep paralysis that night. The nightmare was that a lady had been living in the room in secret, though I don't remember much of the details. When I had sleep paralysis, it was of someone's hand across my face. It was horrifying. I could barely see in the dark and could not move. I was 11 and still remember trying to scream, and the fast pacing of my heart. Everyone who has ever been there finds the house creepy. Even firm deniers of the paranormal. This especially goes for the land. The house is honestly very cute, but has a strange feeling to it that makes it creepy, which is almost more off-putting than an outright scary-looking place. It looks comfortable and safe, but always feels like someone is watching you. Whenever my sister and I would have friends over, they wanted to go through the house at night in pairs. My best friend of 10 years refuses to go in the woods at night. My cousin and I once camped out back by the river, but got too creeped out to fall asleep, so went back into my room and made a fort instead. In the 8th grade, my little sister and I had a slumber party, camping out back, when I saw something outside. Her and I are not far in age, so we get along quite well. Our birthdays are 2 months apart. So that year we had decided to celebrate them together in May, and have a slumber party, bonfire, camp-out. We camped by the river where the bonfire was built, which was far from the house and surrounded by trees. I went up to grab my iPad so we could play music and watch movies. When I walked back outside, it was dark. I was frozen in the mudroom when I first saw it, staring through the warped windows. It looked like a man in a white t-shirt, pacing in circles. I couldn't make out distinct features, but I knew it wasn't my father, because he was the only adult there to watch the fire. I stared at it, pacing for what felt like minutes, with a wrench in my chest. It was so dark I had questioned if what I was seeing was even true. I opened the door and stepped onto the porch to see if it was still there, pacing. I went back out 20 minutes later with a flashlight. It was gone without any sign of ever having been there. Not even shoe marks in the dirt path where it was pacing. When I went to college, I stayed in a dorm for the year. Campus was 30 minutes away. But I quickly fell into a depression and missed my family and dog, so I started commuting. When I came back home, my sister had taken my old room, so I had to move into the same room we had all stayed in for the first few weeks of the initial move-in. I started having sleep paralysis again. In 3 of the dreams, there were spiders in my bed. In 2, someone was standing in the corner watching me as I slept. My cousin saw and heard something in the woods when we were playing manhunt. He believed he saw a woman with dark hair standing just behind the tree line. All gathered together in the field, the 5 of us watched the woods with a mix of focus and fear. For the first time, we weren't loud or cackling, just silent. Alec, the cousin who saw her, was begging to go inside and was pale from head to toe. We had never seen him like that before, so we all scrambled inside. Nobody said anything. We all went inside after. I recently had my cousin over. I hadn't seen her in years due to her moving further down east. We had some wine and talked about all the times we had found the place to be creepy, as we were slightly creeped out. I told her about the dream when I was sick. She went dead silent and got pale. I asked what was going on, and she confessed to having a very similar dream when she was a kid. I don't know if she is lying, but her reaction seemed genuine, and she was never the type to lie. My dog knocks on the door by shaking the knob with his nose. One night I was on FaceTime with my boyfriend, who was aware that our dog does this. We both heard the knob shake, and excitedly yelled my dog's name. Every other time he had been there and happy to see me. It's a frequent occurrence throughout the day with my goob. He loves to check in on everyone throughout the day. I opened the door, and he was not there. I searched, but did not find him. It was strange, to say the least. My boyfriend has never heard anything else on the phone other than a voice after I'd fallen asleep that exclaimed, "Ha!" He said it sounded like a man, but it was quiet, and assumed it was my father outside in the hall. It could have been, but my dad does not laugh like that. Speaking of Goob, Goob is a nickname, don't worry, I didn't name my dog Goob, but it would be fitting. He's really just a big white fluff ball that came to life. He's a Pyrenees and barks at night, a lot. It's common for his breed, but sometimes I wonder if it's something in the house. We have another dog, Baba. He is also a farm dog, and doesn't bark nearly as often, but sleeps snuggled up to my dad all night. I have, however, walked into rooms and seen Moose cowering at a corner before, and cheer up as soon as he noticed me. I presume it could just be because he is a rescue and had a very bad home life up until we adopted him. It started as soon as he moved in, was infrequent, and doesn't happen as often anymore, but still does. Bubba and Goob are best friends, brothers from another mother, and there's never been a territorial issue when it came to space in the house. Sometimes it feels like someone is pacing downstairs. The stairs are very loud and creaky and can be heard through all the doors upstairs. It sounds like stomping. It can be heard upstairs in the attic, too. But I've only heard it once or twice ever. Sometimes I realize I've never heard anyone go down. My sister had a sleep paralysis dream shortly after moving into my old bedroom when I moved out. It was of a little girl living in her room and getting scolded by her mother for something. She did not see anything, and was facing the wall. She said she heard the voices somewhat loudly, as if they were in the corner, but her fan was also blaring next to her head. That's all I can think of for now. I've lived here for a very long time, so I've gotten used to a lot of it. Sorry. Am I insane? Or is it all coincidence, placebo, or might it actually be haunted? 2. I inherited a house from my grandmother in April of 2020. I took a video in the basement of her home under the advice of a colleague that is convinced that I see dead people. I took the video because of the fact that myself and a few family members have seen what appears to be a little boy peering around the doorway in the laundry room. After careful analysis of the video, my coworker and I observed a few different parts of the video where there appears to be ghostly apparitions. I had placed a shoji next to the doorway for privacy, to the half bath in the laundry room. After analyzing the video, I observed the face of an old man with white hair looking around the doorway. In the video, you can see the ghost appear. The old man with white hair isn't the only ghost in the house, but he is the only one I have a photo of. I contacted a paranormal team to check out the home. A woman named Corey and a man named Ron came to the house from the paranormal team. They started an EVP session in my living room. Corey started the session by asking, "Are there any spirits that wish to communicate with us today?" Suddenly, the energy in the room changed. It was as if the spirits in the house were frantically trying to be heard. I could literally feel them stampede into the living room where we were sitting. Corey and Ron suddenly covered their ears and said their ears were ringing in pain. I watched as the green light on the EVP meter lit up. I also observed the kitchen cabinet door open without anyone seen in the room. The paranormal team and I communicated with a man that said he used to live in the home. The man said he just visits the home. We asked how many spirits were there and listened as the man, whose name I won't use, and the other spirits in the room counted off to 9. There is a dog, cat, and 7 spirits in the home. They seemed harmless and were notified that I had to do some updates and remodeling. When I let the man and other spirits know about the remodel, the man said, "That's fine. Like I said, I just visit." I even felt the circular presence of the man in front of me. It felt like a warm tunnel. The man asked if he could touch my hand to prove he was there. I said yes. His touch felt like someone touching me, but almost electric. My ears also rang during this part of the investigation. I also thought I heard my grandma's voice, but I'm not clear because when I asked for her, she didn't say yes. The investigators said they would come back on Halloween for a full team investigation, but cancelled due to more serious cases. I've caught glimpses of full-body people in the house, and other family members have as well. One is a man appearing to be in his 60s with grey thick hair and a tan trench coat. The other a small man with white hair. My brother has seen a young boy, and I have seen a woman with black hair with short bangs. I asked Corey about shadow people, since I had seen them before in the upstairs bedroom. Corey explained that shadow people are ghosts that haven't fully formed. They didn't gather enough energy to look like a person, so they appear in shadow form. Side note, my boyfriend and I were making out on the couch one night, and heard a banging on the basement ceiling. We looked downstairs and found no one there. I feel lucky because they aren't dickhead ghosts. The worst part is that I never video recorded the EVP session, mostly because I was concerned that the paranormal team would think I was using them. I felt relieved when I got answers from the team. A few months later, I hired an electrician to update my electrical box, since the house was built in 1915. The electrician had some questions while he was working in the basement. I went downstairs to talk to him. He asked me if my house was haunted. As we stood in the basement, I could hear the ghost rustling around. I told him yes, and told the ghost that the electrician was here to fix the electrical box, so the house won't burn. I asked them to be courteous, as they always are. No problems for the rest of the day. 3. In the summer of 2024, me, my older sister, and cousin took a trip to Mexico to visit our family. They lived in a small ranch-like town. No official name, no paved roads, just dirt trails leading to other homes, and a very small candy store. Typical Mexican households are one-floor homes, and my grandpa's house, where we were staying, was more of one long hallway with about 4 doors, all on the left side, while the other side were sliding doors to go outside. It wasn't small by any means. All the way down was the door to the bathroom, while straight ahead was the open kitchen. Me, my sister, and my cousin stayed in one of the rooms. The third door, to be exact. It was my little cousin's room, who offered it to us, and left to sleep at his aunt's house for the remainder of our stay. It wasn't a lot to get used to except when the night came. It was so dark, not being able to see your hands in front of your face was something I never got used to. Anyway, being in the middle of nowhere, it was hard to get internet, especially when everyone is trying to catch a signal, so in the night, it seemed a lot faster, or maybe we just had more patience. We'd watch anime episodes on YouTube for hours into the night. Our family who greeted us had to leave to Tijuana to fix some papers in order to come to America. It left 3 of us with my grandpa. We continued our small routine we developed, and the night fell again. Me and my sister were huddled up watching the episode while our cousins slept soundly in the bed next to us. We were used to little insects of the night coming in and making sounds, but we started to hear something else. It sounded larger and far away. My sister paused the episode, and when we stared at the ceiling to focus our hearing on whatever it was, it sounded like sliding, like sandals on the tiles sliding vigorously back and forth. We made eye contact as we heard the sliding door get closer and eventually fade away as they were sliding from one end to the other. My heart felt like it was going to explode. We're not naive to what lies out there in the mountains or what kind of visitors we could encounter if we had bad luck. My sister shrugged it off and said to continue the episode anyway. Weeks went by and the sliding never missed at night. We decided not to tell our cousin, she scares too easily, to keep her calm after letting her know, and my grandpa was a very old man. We thought that this was the last thing he needed as a man just enjoying his chickens and turkeys. Then came that night. We continued our episode and the sliding started. I never really paid attention to what time it was when it started, but I don't think it ever came on at an exact time. The sliding seemed to be even faster until we heard it stop at our door. My sister stopped the episode, and I got as close as I could with her. I kept asking her if she heard that it stopped at our door, but she continued to shush me and tell me it was nothing. I felt fear to my core and frustration to her denying it was anything out of the norm. Then we started to hear the sliding in the room. My sister quickly pulled the bedsheet over us and laid flat. We hear the soft impact of our shoes being slightly pushed aside. My sister continued to put her finger to her lips to shush me as I do my best to not say anything at all. Her eyes looked wide and focused on hearing where it was in the room. No other noise except my cousin snoring slightly. We hear it almost rummage through the things on the floor, and then we hear the sliding become muffled like it left the room. We hear it fade away into what sounded like the kitchen, and then back up to the bathroom. My sister doesn't pull the cover off, but she tells me to go to sleep now. I ask what it could be, saying it's only us 4 here, and the crack under the door can only fit about a spider or even a cricket under. I can feel her frustration when she tells me to shut up and go to sleep. Today, we talk about it more confidently. I know she was just trying to keep me calm and herself calm. We never heard it again after that night, and we told our cousin about it when we went to another city to visit more family, and she thanked us for not telling her, as she definitely would have freaked out. We never really knew what it was. The door never moved. It's a heavy piece of wood that needed more than 1 can of WD-40 to even quiet it down. My grandpa was a 75-year-old man who went to bed at 7 or 8 p.m. to wake up at 4 a.m. to pray every day, so neither of us think it was him. The sliding never made any sense other than to even give off that it was a chicken or any other animal, and either way, the crack under the door was nowhere near big enough to even fit a chick. Crickets might have made their way into it, but there's high doubt that anything can be heavy enough to make loud sliding noises, can fit under a crack of a door and still rummage through items. We never really found what it was, and we were scared to look out of the bedsheet and see anything. Every time our family gets to telling our scary experiences, this one always gets brought up by us. 4. It's been 20 years since this experience, and it only really came back to me because it was the 20th anniversary get-together. There is a 6-lane highway between Kuwait and Iraq, officially known as Highway 80. It runs from Kuwait City to the border of Safwan in Iraq, and then on to the Iraqi city of Barsam. The town was used in Iraq armored divisions for the 1990 invasion of Kuwait. It was repaired after the Gulf War and used by the US and British forces in the initial stages of the 2003 invasion of Iraq. During the Persian Gulf War, American, Canadian, British, and French aircraft and ground forces attacked retreating Iraqi military personnel attempting to leave Kuwait on the night of February 26 to 27, 1991, resulting in the destruction of hundreds of vehicles and the deaths of many of their occupants. Between 1,400 and 2,000 vehicles were hit or abandoned on the main Highway 80 north of Al-Jahara. Some of the vehicles were still in the desert, and you could still find bits of equipment like webbing and helmets out in the sand when you were carrying out your 5 and 20 checks when your convoy stopped. There was always a weird feeling on that road at night. On one evening, we were the last packet in the convoy heading to Barsa. We had the recovery vehicles, and we were tasked with recovery of a broken-down vehicle. We rolled up to the site of the breakdown, and as the recovery team started work, we put out a security cordon. Night vision can really mess up your depth perception sometimes, but you could make out what looked like figures moving in the desert just beyond the cordon. In usual fashion, a squad was sent out to see what was happening, and if it was a possible threat. So off the 4 of us went into the dark desert. Over the PRR, personal radio, we got told to stop as we were right on top of where the suspected people had been. There was nothing that we could see, so we carried out our 5 and 20 checks, and beneath the sand we discovered a pile of rags and 3 helmets. Having established there was no apparent threat, we returned back to the cordon. But over the next 30 to 40 minutes, as we watched out into the desert, there were a lot of times where there looked like there were solid figures moving around the perimeter. Now, if this was a one-off event, I would have put it down to lack of sleep, too much caffeine, using night vision. But over the years since, others from different units who'd worked in that area at different times have talked about the figures in the desert that always seemed to be moving around, but could never be found. On the night of February 26th to 27th, 1991, for the next 10 hours, scores of U.S. Marine, U.S. Air Force, and U.S. Navy aircraft from USS Ranger CV-CVA-61 attacked the convoy using a variety of weapons. Vehicles using the air attacks were later engaged by arriving coalition ground units, while most of the vehicles that managed to evade the traffic jam and continued to drive on the road north were targeted individually. The road bottleneck near the Mutler Ridge police station was reduced to a long, uninterrupted line of more than 300 stuck and abandoned vehicles, sometimes called the Mile of Death. The wreckage found on that highway consisted of at least 28 tanks and other armored vehicles, with many more commandeered civilian cars and buses filled with stolen Kuwaiti property. The death toll from the attack remains unknown. British journalist Robert Fisk said he lost count of the Iraqi corpses crammed into the smoldering wreckage or slumped face down in the sand at the main site, and saw hundreds of corpses strewn up the road all the way to the Iraqi border. American journalist Bob Drogan reported seeing scores of dead soldiers in and around the vehicles mangled and bloated in the drifting desert sands. A 2003 study of the Project on Defense Alternatives, PDA, estimated that fewer than 10,000 people rode in the cut-off main caravan, and when the bombing started, most simply left their vehicles to escape through the desert or into the nearby swamps where some died from their wounds. I think that at times we were maybe encountering some of those fleeing Iraqi soldiers. 5. When I was about 10 years old, back in the early 90s, I sometimes liked to bike to get around. That was all you had for entertainment. I went everywhere on that thing. One Saturday evening, the weather had started out just fine, totally clear and sunny, and I was hanging out a block down from my house, a 65-year-old craftsman home. I was at my friend's house, who wanted me to stay the night. Neither one of our single moms was home yet, as they both worked weekends to make ends meet, so we were left to our own devices until later that night. We agreed I should ride back to my house before it got too dark and grab some board games and fun things to do. On my way home, the wind starts to pick up more and the cloud cover had moved in, making me pick up the pace more and more as it was starting to sprinkle a tad. When I got back to my house, no one was home and the back door was unlocked as per usual. Latchkey kids who lose their keys and had to leave the back door unlocked, so I left my bike on my front lawn and walked around my house to the back door. I went in and everything seemed fine, but the house did feel oddly quiet on this day, and I got a strange vibe like I shouldn't be there, and I had no clue why. I went inside, closing the door behind me, and went on with my business. Grabbed a few games from my room, headed to the front living room since our house front was out there on the other side of the house and my bedroom was in the back. I called my friend to verify which games I should bring, and while we were on the phone casually talking, it started raining harder, and we both heard a huge thunderclap outside. Suddenly, the back door of the house where I had just been flipped open out of nowhere. This was a heavy old door and I know I latched it, and that's why I became terrified. That door has never blown open so hard before, but I shrugged it off as being the wind that I had experienced coming home, and figured I hadn't latched the door all the way. My friend heard it through the phone, and I told her that I'd close it on my way back there when I leave to come back to her. We went on talking for a moment or two more, before I decided to head back out to my bike that was still laying on the front lawn, when suddenly I started hearing heavy footsteps coming from the back of the house where that door was. Every hair in my body raised up for some reason, and I got stiff with fear, as I knew it wasn't my mom. My older brother wasn't home, as he had gone with friends hours ago, and I didn't recognize the sound of these footsteps. They felt foreign, like someone who didn't belong in my house had entered. I told my friend that I think someone just came into the house, and it's not anyone I know. She freaked out and told me to drop everything and get out of there, come back to her house right now. Out of sheer terror, I flew through the front door, leaving it open, dragged my bike out into the street damn near, and fled like hell down the center street, so that if someone should pass me in a vehicle, they'd see me and I could ask for help. My friend's mom had called the police while I headed back to her place, and a bunch of cop cars surrounded my house and went in to investigate what was going on. My mom had come home to the scene first to see all this, and she thought something terrible had happened. The cops didn't find anyone inside the house, but what they did find was large men's-sized muddy shoe prints that went from the back porch through the back door, past the dining table in the kitchen, traveling through 2 rooms and almost making it to the living room, where I was, until they suddenly stopped where the carpet to the living room started. The shoes we had in our house did not match the size or the type of shoe that was found on the floor throughout the house. Our backyard didn't have any amount of mud like the shoes that had come into the house either. We had thick, beautiful glass and clean concrete back there, and a clothesline. Still, to this day, none of it makes sense. No one knew what to make of it, but I'll never forget it. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 408. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do hit the like button and share the video with friends and family, living or dead. And if it is within your means, please do support me on my Patreon page. Understand if it's not, but just throwing that out there. Okay, no other business today, so let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, what is the last good spooky movie that you saw? If we're going with kind of more horror and not aliens, because there was one I saw, it was actually available in the UK through the Disney Channel, I think HBO in the US it would be on. The more pure horror one I saw was called Backhead. It's about a young woman who inherits her father's pub, and in the basement she finds this creature chained up down there with a bag on its head. Turns out it's a shapeshifter, and it can take on and personify lost loved ones, but you can only do it for a certain amount of time, because the longer you do it, the more control this thing starts to get, and what it really, really wants is to be free. So inheriting her estranged father's pub is more of a burden than a gift. It's a really good movie, has quite a good, clever ending. I quite liked it, and I'm looking forward to watching more horror films in the upcoming year. Still on my list to watch are In a Violent Nature. I hear that's quite good. Abigail sounds a lot of fun. I've not seen that yet. I do want to see that. There's probably a bunch of others. I want to see the new Beetlejuice movie, but that's really not horror, is it? Horror adjacent, I'd probably call that one. And maybe The Last Salem's Lot, although I don't hear great things about it. It sounds, from the reviewers whose opinion I trust, like the Horror Guru, for example, it's more of a decent but missed opportunities a lot of the way. So we'll see what happens, and I'm sure I'll probably watch something low budget and a lot of fun with Nicolas Cage in it, because he seems to do a lot of those these days. I think he just likes to act in interesting projects. Let me know what you think in a comment below. And before we go, let's take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And this one comes from Paranormal Stories 406, and I think it was, what do you think lava would taste like? That one was from the Discord server. Today's answer comes from, let's take a look, see... Victor Valdez. I imagine that lava would taste like the kind of rock it's made from, but just extra hot. After all, scaldingly hot tomato soup doesn't stop being tomato soup just because it's too hot. Nor would it if you froze it. So basically, if you lick some obsidian or granite, there's your flavor. Now just imagine it too hot. Yes, if you want to be logical and rational about it, but a little bit of whimsy now and again never hurt anyone. For example, I've always imagined that purple would taste like cinnamon and rose. I do like purple, and I also like those flavors, so... Anyway, I'm going to head off and try to stop being weird. So until next time... I'm going to fail, by the way. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.